Machine here, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. 20-minute video for 2 minutes worth of content. Gold.
Last month, when s1mple, the elite world's best player, Na'Vi's superstar, was streaming, he had a clip that was made from his stream where he's talking about how to be consistent as a top player, as a pro player. And he's kind of incredulous in this clip. Like, he's talking about people making mistakes in FPL. And basically, the gist of the line that he says, which a lot of people thought was funny or had some some people thought was an empty saying or like kind of a trite thing to say, was he said, just play on your max level every time. Now, there was more to it than that. He did also say, like, you know, even if you're playing FPL or matchmaking or face it, things that some people might consider for fun, you should still try and play at your, as he said, 100% level. Now, obviously, that initially sounds fucking hilarious, right? Like s1mple just turning to you and you going, s1mple, how do you maintain consistency as a top player? And he just goes, fucking easy. Just play at 100% all the time. The idea is, first of all, that sounds fucking baller as fuck that you could say that, because if you've seen s1mple's game and you've seen him stream and you've watched him for the last couple of years, you'll know he kind of does. He plays at 100% all the time. Like, he can do shit in scrims and in matchmaking and face it games that are unbelievable, but then he can go and do that in an actual match as well. Like, that really is how he's playing the game, how he's practicing the game. But I think even then, taking aside the joke element of like, well, s1mple, but we aren't you. We don't have the insane ability to just play 100% all the time or play at our max level. People won't realize, like, there's actually a lot of wisdom in there, but we'll get into how exactly that comes about. There was another example of s1mple trying to give away part of the secret again, but seemingly giving nothing away, where in a feature that they produced for ESL at ESL 1 Cologne 2019, most recently, they were reviewing past years of the tournament. And when they reviewed the 2016 tournament, they had this section where it was about s1mple getting that graffiti from his legendary 1-on-2 against Fnatic on Cash, where he drops down, he kills the first guy with a no-scope mid-air, and then he kills the other guy with a no-scope way across the map. Now, in this scenario, obviously people are going to be like, how is it even possible? How could you do that? And s1mple says in the clip, like, basically, well, I'm practicing my no-scopes, so, you know, I've practiced them, therefore I'm good at them, therefore I can pull it off. Now, all of these statements sound silly, like, you know, well, that's just obvious, or too blatantly obvious that, well, yeah, duh, if you practice and try to play your best, then you're going to be your best, or simplistic, or come on, there's surely a lot more to it than that. But here's why. That's because these are insights, because this is wisdom. That's not a plan. He didn't give you a set of instructions you could follow there. He didn't actually give you all the information you need that allowed him to come to the point in his career where he could get that epiphany, that one sentence explanation, which doesn't actually allow you to get to that point. It's just a summary of what his experience was. For me, the difference between like a clever thing and wisdom is, to me, wisdom is where you've applied something you've learned, but mixed in with and integrated with the experience of learning that thing, overcoming a certain other way of thinking, changing your paradigm, going through a certain journey. And at the end, you can summarize it as, right, well, what I needed to do was get to a point where I could practice at my top level every time. But the question is, how does one even get to do that? How does one even set up a practice in that way? How does one set up one's mind to practice certain things in a certain way? And so, to understand what they're saying, you must either talk to them further, use follow-up questions, ask for examples, or you must follow their approach. You must consider the context of what they were trying to do, hopefully have a similar experience, and therefore be able to fully appreciate what they meant by those statements. It's like if you hear any kind of wisdom in the world, like if someone Buddhist says, we are all one. Now, you could easily say, well, that's a silly statement. You know, like, yeah, we're all a human race, but, you know, we're all individual, independent actors with autonomous abilities within the world. And, you know, if there's no spirit world, we're all separated entirely and we can never really know what someone else's thoughts are or even what they truly mean. Or, right, you can do that kind of like rational materialist breakdown of it. But if you take that statement from someone who's had a very deep, profound psychedelic experience, what they might mean by that is they had a sense for how the individual elements of personality can fade away. And we do all have a core of our soul or being that is very similar in many ways. The things we want, the things we desire, the things we're afraid of, the things we're pushed away from, that we're naturally attracted and repelled from certain things. You could find some element of that. You could even go on some deeper level and say, what is consciousness and how does it affect the universe? And on some level, is there some sort of connecting elements there, as some kinds of psi research maybe imply? You could go with that. The point is, it depends where you're coming from, what the information before you got to that statement was. The statement itself isn't actually the journey that gets you there. It's just the destination. And so someone says, well, how do you get there? And you say, well, just go to Texas. Well, no, I'm saying, how do I get there? Where do I go? Where do I start? What would I need at the beginning? What type of journey? How would you suggest I take the journey? Eventually, hopefully I end up in Texas. But what I need to do first to get to that point in time, right? You wouldn't just get the map of Texas. You need the map for all the rest of it before, right? And you need the ability to go that way. You'd hopefully want to find someone who's done it before to take some of their advice. So a similar one. It was even a classic line in a Beatles song, obviously, all you need is love. Well, you obviously don't literally only need love. You need like oxygen and a certain percentage of it. You need clean water, hopefully. You need some sort of food, sustenance. You need, there's certain things that people emotionally need to get by. But if you take that statement and you've ever been someone who had a brilliant relationship with someone that got you through tough times, maybe you financial, maybe emotional otherwise, maybe you were literally a political prisoner or something, in that scenario, maybe love, a strong, a close emotional bond with someone might be enough to get you through, might get you through the darkest times, might be the Viktor Frankl approach of man's search for meaning, right? There's wisdom in this. It's just that if you only take the very small sentence and think that's it, then yeah, there is nothing in there. You have to bring part of the wisdom to the experience. They've just encapsulated it. They've just nailed it the best way. They've just phrased it correctly. So when you consider that s1mple is a pro player, right? First of all, a lot of pro players aren't thinkers. They're players. They play the game. They're about being good in the game. They're about being good with the guns in the game and some of the decision making, but they don't always have the bigger picture that, for example, their in-game leader might have. They definitely don't have the bigger picture their coach often will have. They don't have the bigger picture that an analyst who watches every top team might have sometimes. They're specializing at being very, very good in a specific way that an analyst isn't specializing on knowing about that aspect. And therefore, they have their own areas they're much better and more knowledgeable, but not necessarily other areas. So not only do they not think about the game sometimes, they also don't know how to train someone who's not them. They've been spending their whole life training themselves in most cases. Then you add in, a lot of them, because they're not thinkers, aren't so great at articulating what they mean. They will often say something very simplistic. Well, I was trying to play very aggressively and give my team a chance to win. Maybe what they meant was, at this moment on the map, I knew that the enemy was setting up for an attack on the other side, so I thought if I pressured the map over here, I could draw a guy over or make them waste utility delaying me. So therefore, when they try the attack on the other side, my team knows it's set up. I've gained information that they're not on this part of the map. You see what I mean? If you start to break it down, there could be a lot of really interesting, poignant things that could be said, specific details about how their team and an opponent play, but they won't think to say all that. A lot of it might be taken as a given. They themselves might not be able to roll back their thinking as to how they got to this final thinking, and so you might not get that much out of it. Then throw in, it's a second language. This guy's speaking Russian, obviously. The language he speaks is Ukrainian, quite similar to Russian. There's not really any connection between English and that language. So his English is much more limited. What he can say is much more limited. His vocabulary is much more limited. Certain paradigms and idea concepts that come within the language and thinking in that language probably aren't all there. I know this because famously, a guy who had very broken English was the legendary Quake player Cooler from Russia. Now in English, he would often be a meme. He'd say hilarious or cocky things that seem very harsh or black and white. But if you ever listen to an interview with him that was subtitled from Russian or had real Russian like dub or something, he could be saying incredible, insightful, poetic, super deep things with a lot of nuance that just didn't come through in English. So the point I'm going to make is I'm going to take those two simple statements and I'm going to show you what I see as some of the wisdom behind it, how he arrived at that point and what he's genuinely getting to and how you can apply it yourself. So let's take the first one about play at your top level all the time in any setting. Now the key there is the any setting part. And play at your top level. Now, that doesn't mean be the best player, be your absolute best at all times, never have an off game, never have a game where it doesn't work for you. His point is about mindset to practice. So first of all, it's about practicing with purpose. When you practice, you think of specific things for the practice that you want to work on. I want to improve on my nade usage in this way. Sometimes I waste nades. I want to save some of my nades for the clutch. I want to take aggressive peaks because normally I just take kind of the ones that come to me. And so when it's a game where the enemy has a CT lockdown or my team's not doing well, I have a hard time getting into the game, so I'm going to play very aggressively. I'm going to take the fastest peak I can from the spot. Whatever it might be, practice with purpose so that you're specifically trying to train one thing, and in doing so, you're getting lots of experience in, lots of reps, and you're thinking about how you're doing it, therefore you're seeing like ways you could tweak it, and the idea is then, when you go and practice, go and play a real scrim or a real match, it's already back there, you've already been working on it, you're raising the level of it, and now it will become, like everything else, part of your instincts. part of your natural game in the sense that you don't have to think about it loads in the game. You've already spent your time practicing that elsewhere. Well, that's the thing a lot of people don't do. Even top pros, they play the scrim to get better in terms of as a team, with tactics, etc., or to keep their individual level high. A lot of them don't, even at the pro level, practice things specifically. It's not just about randomly practicing, just playing a scrim or a matchmaking game. That will practice some things a little bit, depending on when they happen in a match. We're talking about practicing something specifically to improve that area. Then there's the angle of play at your top level. Remain focused at all times. However, while you're doing in the game, maybe mechanically you whiffed a bunch of shots. You're having a bad match, this guy's getting the better of you. Staying focused each round, not letting that waver, because that is something that you have to build up. It's a type of stamina. If you're someone where you feel great one day and bad another day, yes, look at the factors around what was happening those days, but also set your goal that you're going to be able to withstand the pressure to tilt when a game is going against you, when things aren't easy. To be able to be in a game where you're down and out in the match and you only have a few chances to come back, but you're going to stay focused to ensure that if you get one of those opportunities, you're going to execute it and have a chance to come back in the game. You're not going to say because you only have a 20% chance to win the game, it's over, and therefore I'm going to dick around or I'm going to play overly aggressively or do some stupid things here. Because in that scenario, you'll never get good at that area. You'll never be able to practice that aspect with purpose. There's another part of being a great player. I think if you look at s1mple, his ability to play amazingly in games Na'Vi is losing and loses is unbelievable. I think there's very few players have ever played Counter-Strike had that level of focus and weren't able to be rattled in the same way that he is not rattled in many, many of these scenarios. It's about dedication at this point in time. How much do you really want it? If you really want it, you won't just say, well, this is a game I'm not playing well, so who gives a shit? No, dedication is about in that game playing at your high level. Then there's the whole aspect of why he mentions matchmaking, face it, things that aren't explicitly part of a pro gamer's career. Yeah, he threw FPL in there, but that's also supposed to be for fun, right? That's the point. It's about not messing around and practicing incorrectly in those games, because those habits, and this is the point s1mple was trying to make, will then bleed over into the rest of your game. All the time you're playing the game, to some degree you're practicing the game. You're training the robot, the subconscious part of your mind, how to play the game. You're training your instincts for the game. And in a match, you're just going to react, you're going to do things, you're going to have an idea, you're going to execute it. And a lot of that's going to be predicated on what you already practiced elsewhere. So there's a lot of pro players. I remember when Lurpus was an in-game leader in 1.6, he would say this is a nightmare scenario. In scrims, his players would do stupid things and push up with a deagle and try and go some crazy long-range shot, and they would go, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't do it in the match itself. But that's not true. Because they'd practiced that way, some of that stuff creeped into matches. Or in matches, they weren't always as sure as to what the right move was to do. Or if they knew what the right move was, the right angle to hold, but they hadn't practiced it enough, maybe they wouldn't be as good at executing that as they otherwise should be, even though they know it's the right move to do. So actually practicing, even in those bad matches or less serious matches or less important matches, at the ultimate way you want to play the game, will sharpen the iron of your overall match and mindset, so that in the big game you will also play exactly the way you want to play it and the way that you've practiced, and there will be more of a one-to-one transition between practice and the official performance. So that's why, if you go and look at s1mple, I often made this point when he was on the come-up, if you ever watched this guy stream from the Team Liquid days on, even on his stream, even in a random matchmaking game where he's dropping 50 kills, he will play the way he plays in a pro game. Now, because he's s1mple, some of that might not be the right way to play, but it's the right way for him, and that's why he got his game to such an absurdly high level that at pro play levels he can do shit you should never be able to do, except in a mismatched matchmaking game that you're playing and you're like LAM and they're all fucking silvers or something. I don't even know if that's even possible to have that match, but you get the point I'm making. Because he did do that and he practiced in that way. This is one of the reasons why this is a guy who got so mad at his teammates over the years, because he had two ways of thinking about it. One, if you can't do the right move or the correct move that I could do here, then that means either you didn't practice enough, and if you're not practicing enough, well, that's a disgrace like that. I should call you out, right? Why aren't you practicing enough? Or you practiced, but you didn't practice that specific aspect of your game. And if you put more effort into that, and I tell you it's wrong now, you go away and you practice that, you'll get it to a high level. Now, the reason why he thought one of those two things, neither of which has to be true, is because to his mind, if it's neither of those, if you really just are not good enough and no amount of practice or no specific type of practice could get you that level, in his mind, it's like, why is this guy even on the team? Why is he even a pro player? He shouldn't even be allowed to play. He can't do any of these things, or he should never be allowed to criticize me, because I can do that, do all that stuff, and I do practice properly. So he, as someone who's fucked up in that way that's totally unforgivable, should never criticize me whatsoever. So you can see how this would get to him. And even though actually his frustration was coming from a good place, it's coming from a place that a coach could understand, the way he expressed it was way too corrosive. It had a detrimental effect on his teams. And most crucially, it wouldn't win people over to do what he wanted to do, to improve in that specific way. And part of that is because, just as you see in this example here, he couldn't share what he meant by practice in a certain way or focus in a certain way or play with consistency. He would just say something like play with consistency or work to improve that area. And they wouldn't know what that meant or what the techniques and skill set out there existed were to let you actually be able to do that. Another thing that used to tilt him as well is if people messed around in scrims. If you were on Team Liquid and you were a very skilled player, but who cares about this team? We're just playing selfless. They're not even a top team anyway. No. So someone like him, we're playing selfless in our maximum level so that when we play Luminosity, we play at our maximum level. We just make this a routine thing. Greatness is a habit, not a specific one instance of doing something, which is often, again, different how a lot of pros play. They think, well, this game doesn't matter much, which it doesn't, but it does to the way you practice and your mentality to practicing. So then there's the other aspect, the idea of practicing no scopes, right? That's another one everyone's going to go, well, duh, everyone who's an AWP is practicing no scopes. We all practice no scopes, simple. We're just not as good as you because you're a fucking god. It's like, listen, he is a god and he can do no scopes you will never do. But almost none of you are practicing the way he is. Like, he doesn't just mean CSDM, but he means CSDM as well. Even CSDMing, most fans aren't doing anything like a pro does. Think about if you've ever watched NBK stream where he'll just do like, I do 100 AWP kills, 100 AK kills, 100 M4. You do that before you go and play your matchmaking games or your face it, do you? No, bullshit. Maybe you do it once every now and then or while you're waiting for a game. He does that every day at the beginning of the stream. Every day before practice. That's why his skills are super polished and knows exactly what technique to use. Same with no scopes. If you practice them every day, 200 no scopes landed, you will get way better at no scoping. Then add in matchmaking, etc. In matchmaking, I've seen Simple specifically go for no scopes in scenarios where he could have just killed the person with a normal scope and AWP shot because he's trying to practice the no scope at that angle. I've even seen him go into empty servers, practice jumping over a box, shooting bots, practice crouching and shooting people. If you notice, there's a little secret that he seems to have as a no scope artist that others don't who are AWPers. He seems to crouch for a lot of his no scopes and obviously hits jumping no scopes no one else even thinks to go for, probably because he practiced in a very specific way to let himself know that the odds were better on some of those shots than they would ever imagine as somebody who didn't practice with that purpose in that particular fashion. So the point in this video was, first of all, as to why pro players often have a hard time getting that wisdom, that knowledge out. And quite frankly, it's because it would be like asking someone who's an amazing piano player, how do you do that song? And he just goes, right, well, I go C minor, A, F, B, and I go up and down the chords. And that wouldn't help you, right? Because you can see the notes. You can't do it is the point. What you really want to ask is, how do I get to a level of dexterity where I can do those notes? How do I get to a level where I can remember the transition from that to the other? How did you practice when you could only do this first type of a song and not a more advanced? That's what you really want to know. What you really want to know is the journey they went on, the experience they had, and then at the end, what they're saying will make even more sense to you than it does now, or will prove to be a very intelligent thing to say, whereas it initially might have seemed like a very glib, almost cliched, trite thing to say. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, NateDOhDoubleG, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Wendelful, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Daniel Olivar, Chi Mao, JDubs, Kolja G, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion and weixz. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers or who the guests are for my upcoming videos? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly donate a discussion with me. Well, all of these perks and more are available at the Patreon link in the description box below.